Yet each man kills the thing he loves, by each let this be heard. Some do it with a bitter look, some with a flattering word. The coward does it with a kiss, the brave man with a sword. Some kill their love when they are young, and some when they are old. Some strangle with the hands of lust, some with the hands of gold. The kindest use a knife because the dead so soon grow cold. Some love too little, some too long, some sell and others buy. Some do the deed with many tears, and some without a sigh. For each man kills the thing he loves, yet each man does not die. He does not die a death of shame, on a day of dark disgrace, nor have a noose about his neck, nor a cloth upon his face, nor drop feet foremost through the floor into an empty space. Some of the astute readers among you may have recognised that that was an excerpt from Oscar Wilde's The Ballad of Reading Gaol. And when Wilde made that assertion that each man kills the thing he loves, he was not just making an airy poetic statement that was meant to sound edgy and resonant in a kind of nihilistically philosophical kind of way. He was talking from direct personal experience, because he wrote that while he was in Reading Gaol, while he was actually in prison at a time when homosexuality was still a criminal offence. And this offence had been brought against him not by the paparazzi or particularly any of his critics or people mudracking against him, but was instigated by a former lover with whom he had had a homosexual affair. So the idea that someone with whom you've shared love, with whom you've been intimate, with whom you have borne your innermost soul as well as all the fruits and delights of your own body, could also be the source of your own destruction. And I was thinking about this because I've spent the morning cogitating upon the nature of Pluto, and why it is that planet so often expresses itself in dualities of love or hate, or where it sets up these situations where we end up scapegoating something that we once adored and treasured and put on a pedestal. And I wanted to look at some of the underlying psychological motivations and factors of control and personal willpower that play into the difficult, turbulent narratives that can unfold under this planet's auspices. So Pluto, by natal placement, can indicate something in our life with which we have an obsessive love-hate relationship, where we crave something with all of our being unto the very depths, and yet there's also a reptilian part of us that fears if we fully gave in to that thing that we craved, it would destroy and kill us in some ineradicable way that we can feel on a deep visceral level, but which consciously we might not understand. It is a deep gut animal response that takes over our synapses and changes us into someone who may be very different from our ordinary conscious awareness. So why should love and hate so easily be able to vacillate between one and another in this Enantiodromia of the heart? Well, this is where the obsessive love of Pluto, especially if Pluto is in relationship with Venus, is different from ordinary, everyday garden variety love. In ordinary relationships and connections with someone, there's a feeling of mutuality, of harmony, of accord. You meet someone, they meet you, you both make each other feel nice, and you say, well, hey, this is great, gee, this is just swell, let's go steady together and just carry on nurturing this pleasant energy that seems to arise whenever we're around. But in a Plutonian love, there is essentially always some kind of imbalance of power and control that turns the ordinary matter of relating into a huge power struggle that mostly plays out on a subliminal and unconscious level. It's very rare, except in those moments of explosive outbursts and sudden revelations, that these festering subterranean forces actually find a way of bringing themselves to the surface. So instead of the cute meat that we talked about in regards to Venusian love, this is more the case of, say you're in a room with a bunch of friends, you all belong to the same group together, you're chatting away, you're having a nice time, and then someone else comes in the room who you've never seen before. And even though you don't know them, automatically there is an overwhelming visceral response in you. Your whole body seems to go into flight or fight mode. Every last fibre and nerve of your being is stimulated and awakened by this person's presence. You cannot take your eyes off of them, and yet at the same time you're also afraid of looking at them because you fear that the intensity that they have suddenly and inexplicably ignited in you will reveal itself to them and give the game away. And this game is just beginning. You don't really understand where it's going yet. You don't know what the rules are. You just know that before you've even spoken a word, this person has an unspoken power over you. They have a necromantic spell that they cast over you that just cannot be shaken off. You can't just be your ordinary natural self around this person, because your awareness of this deep, burning, unthwartable desire that you have for this person is always in some way manipulating, impacting and influencing everything you do. Whether you want it to or not, it is always there, like this spider at the center of your neurons, pulling the puppet strings of your intentions and your actions. And the rage, hatred, enmity, resentment and jealousy we can feel towards someone who elicits these kind of feelings in us without us having any awareness of how they feel about us in return, arise because they remind us of how little control we have over ourselves, and they can also expose us to hidden depths that we might much prefer to know are not there. For people who have positive aspects of Pluto, or a harmonious relationship with Scorpio or the 8th house, they might have learned early on in life that we all have this deep, dark, brooding, obsessive, fanatical part of us that can be manipulative and conniving and not entirely trustworthy, always concealing its intentions behind this impenetrable and unrevealing mask. They might just accept, yeah, that's all part of being human, it's nothing to worry about. In fact, I rather enjoy the life and death intensity of that experience because I appreciate how it can destroy and erode so much of what is meaningless and superficial and help me get to that pulsating core of life that makes me feel like I am alive, that I am right there at the center of the drama of the universe where everything is happening and all of that intensity is being channeled for me and my sweet heart and loins. But for someone who has a complex relationship with Pluto in their part, if it's in square, if it's in opposition, quincunx, or just a singleton, there might be a denial of this part of them. They might think that, you know, I'm a pure, honest, open-hearted, good-natured person who would never think badly of anyone. I don't hate, I don't play games, I don't manipulate, I don't scheme. Everything that you could possibly want to know about me is always right there on the surface. There's nothing subliminal I'm concealing. There's no ulterior motives that I'm playing around. I'm a good person. I'm an upstanding Christian. It's other people who are all those things, not me. I'm rational and responsible, and I get on with life and don't go in for all these nasty machinations. And if someone thinks that about themselves and yet then meets someone who suddenly ignites all of these deep, restless, compulsive, scorpionic cravings, they have to admit that I am not the person I thought I was, that I am much more complex, much more nuanced, and much more still driven by primordial forces than the more civilized, rational part of my awareness would like to think. And some people can embrace that awareness. They can say, okay, this is a part of me that is there whether I like it or not. I need to incorporate it and think about a way that I can synthesize it with the rest of my personality so that it can be put to good use. What does this part of me want, and how can I express that need in a way that isn't going to destroy me and the object of my besottedness? But someone else may just suddenly feel all of the fear and the inner conflict and the unwanted intensity that this person, thing, or phenomenon awakens within them, and they turn all of that hate onto the other person for having prompted that experience. They can say, my life was so much easier, so much smoother, so much more binary and clear and dualized before you came along, and now I find out that I'm a monster, that I'm a fanatic, that I'm obsessive, that I'm crazy, that I have this psychopathic lust that won't be silenced and which stalks me in the middle of the night like a wraith or a phantom, like a banshee always standing over me, screaming in my ear when I'm just trying to do my administrative work. You know, it's, why did you come into my life? Why did fate bring you into my life just to awaken all this pain that I was quite happy not having to wrestle and contend with? And there's a wonderful example of the kind of personal transformations that this unexpected, unwanted love can have on an unexpected person in Robertson Davies' first novel, Tempest Tossed, whereas there is this character called Hector McElraith, who is this very buttoned up, hyper-logical, hyper-rational mathematician who's also good at doing private accounting. He's someone who's lived a life in which there have been no loose ends, no frayed knots, where everything has been tidy and orderly and neat, and he has this unwavering belief in himself and kind of unspoken sense of superiority that there is nothing in this life that cannot be mastered by the forces of logic and reason. He's a very airy and earthy person. You know, everything has its place where it can be tied up. You know, there's no reason for emotions and messiness and chaos and having a fuss. That's other people. I'm just a good, straight-thinking, straight-talking guy. But then he gets involved in a local play and falls disastrously head over heels with the girl in the play who is playing Ariel. And from having been this punctilious, fastidious stick in the mud, he instead becomes obsessive. He stalks this girl, he hides in the bushes below her window, he gets involved with the play when previously he'd just been the accountant, simply so he can be near her. He thinks up all these obsessive, subtle little ways in which he can somehow perhaps get close to her, but without doing it directly, because Pluto doesn't like to do things directly. It wants to be this mastermind. It wants to take all of the natural social constructs and find a way of engineering them so that what has been incredibly calculated looks like a natural event unfolding, so it can look like the hands of fate rather than someone who is manipulating fate behind the scenes, trying to bring it into their own hands. And at the beginning of this process, Hector thinks that, you know, I have every reason to think that I'm a good mate for this person. I have a good job. I have a good salary. It looks like I'm only going to go on the up and up in the world. But what he doesn't realize is that he lacks emotional feeling, because he spent most of his life suppressing those feelings because they're too chaotic and messy. And now that they're all coming out to the surface, he lacks the personal responsibility and the psychological accountability to know what to do with them. And so he goes completely overboard. He experiences the first major depression that he's had since he was a childhood, from going from this world that seemed to be his private kingdom in which he had absolute control. And that's what Pluto wants. It wants absolute dictatorial control. He finds that even though he is master of so many kingdoms in his own pretty pathetic small life, he cannot control the heart of a young girl. And this drives him to such extremes of agony that on the mid-play he ends up trying to hang himself and failing in a tool shed behind the stage. So there can be a sense of Pluto being this great humbler, this god in the planetary pantheon who is responsible not for the logical, rational justice of the courts and the legal system and all the moral, ethical systems that we derive to make us feel so good about ourselves, just like that secret belch did. He rules the primal law of reality. He rules karma, that says whatever you judge or scoff or condemn someone else for experiencing, I will force you to experience as well. So if you go around mocking everyone else who's messy and emotional and psychologically scarred and think that you're perfect in comparison, at some point Pluto will come along and show that all of those things that you condemned out there in society, they exist in you too. If you think you're one of these nobler, holier-than-thou people who would never fall recklessly in love and get engaged in some kind of complex romantic triangle or have an affair with someone because you're too good a citizen for that, then Pluto will put you in a situation where there is a fait accompli, where almost everything ends up being done for you, where you suddenly find there is a deeper force within you that is more powerful than your conscious mind, that there is a hidden reptilian side of you that is putting you into all kinds of situations against your conscious will, that whereas it seems that we are the conscious puppet master most of the time, instead when Pluto comes along, it's like this hand, this kundalini hand has crept itself up its spine and in to our lower reptilian brain, and it says, "Hi, remember me." A bit like Venom in the Marvel universe, that experience of wrestling with a force that is stronger than you and always seems to be working against you, and yet if you can find some kind of positive relationship with that, as happens in the movies, then you can come to a greater state of personal psychological homeostasis, because what we deny or what we disown or what we refuse to believe exists within ourselves, once it does arise, can adulterate our minds. Because it's so unexpected, because it produces that cognitive dissonance, it can destroy us because we refuse to give it the life that it wanted. Anyway, that's only barely scratched the surface of all the things that I wanted to say about Pluto. So this will be a first part. Other parts will follow. As usual, please like, share and subscribe. Contact me via email if you want any astrological advice or counselling. I also have a Patreon if you want to support me on there, and I'm trying to get back into a steady rhythm so that I can give you earlier access to videos than when they are released here on YouTube. You can follow me on Instagram at Astrology and Underwear. And yes, next time I will focus more on the scapegoating nature of Pluto.